All right, we'll go ahead and get started. I want to welcome you all to today's colloquium. I'm Rhonda Fritz, Assistant Professor in the Elementary Education Department, and I get the honor of introducing our speaker today. Mike is an Associate Professor of Theater and Department Chair here at EOU. He teaches scenic and lighting design, stagecraft, Irish drama, band plays, theater history, introduction to theater, and advanced studies in theater. And he still finds time to direct many shows, including he has directed Titanic the Musical, The Crucible, Life is a Dream, and Monty Python's Spamalot here at EOU. Currently, he's also writing a basic theater text titled The Theater Ghost's Guide to Theater, covering theater production and design. Mike earned his MFA from Mason Gross School of the Arts at Rutgers University in Design. He holds a Bachelor of Science in both Theater and Social Studies and History from Southern Utah University, and his goal is to tell part of the story when it comes to design for theater productions. Previously, Mike has been an Assistant Professor of Theater at Augustana College and at Georgetown College, Technical Director for Randolph College, and Resident Designer and Technical Director for the Lynchburg Fine Arts Center, for Granbury Opera House, and for Black Hills Community Theater. He's also worked for Walt Disney Resorts, Entertainment Art at Disneyland as a Consultant Assistant Art Director. He holds memberships in the United States Institute of Theater Technology and is a unit commissioner as he volunteers in the Boy Scouts of America in the Eastern Oregon District Blue Mountain Council. He has participated there and offered training to adult leaders and to youth. As a board member on the Liberty Theater Foundation, he has contributed his expertise in theater technology and design to its eventual restoration. Mike's continuing long-term goal is to work for the success of EOU students and the institution and see in the 100th anniversary in 2029. Please welcome Mike Heather to today's colloquium.
Thank you. Good afternoon. So, over the years of doing theater, every now and again, the question comes up, how did you do that? You know, what happens on stage when it comes to scenery and lighting and special effects and that. So before we started the show here, Into the Woods, I figured if I could fit it in and they would take it, the Colloquium gang would take it, I would do a colloquium on explaining how we do it, how we create the scenery, the lighting, that process, and that because the audience is familiar with the finished product, with the performance, with the actors, and that. So that's what spurred this and that, because even last night I was sitting in the audience, we had opening night for Into the Woods, and someone leaned over that knew me, how did you do that one prop? And so I explained it to her. Also, there might be some spoilers in this if you haven't seen Into the Woods and that, so I apologize, but it's the context that this presentation is in and that. Let me go ahead. Anyway, so essentially what I say I do, I create the environment that the actors perform in, the three-dimensional environment. Which includes furniture, walls, stairs, doorways, and the lighting, the illumination of the environment. And I tie that all together and work with the director on that. And that process, for me, sometimes starts in the previous year. I mean, we choose our seasons in winter term. We chose Into the Woods over a year ago. And even before we really got rolling, my mind was thinking, okay, how am I going to approach this production in our space, in this theater in Mackenzie, and that. I should just keep the remote instead of going. So. First, I want to talk about lighting, because without lighting, no one's going to see anything in that. The illumination. Sometimes lighting designers, lighting technicians don't get enough credit because unless audience members can't see it, or they don't necessarily comment on it, and so that's just sort of a lighting designer's lament. And that my best man at my wedding is a lighting designer in New York, and he says that all the time. It's like, yeah, if the audience can see it, I don't usually get recognition, but anyways, and that. And what you see now is a cue from the show, the illumination, and there's a little bit of texture with lights on the floor, leaf breakups and that. And one of the standard lighting equipments we use is not something you would have usually in your house. This is a standard incandescent spotlight. Years ago, back in the turn of the last century, it was called the limelight, and it was much more archaic. This, unlike your house, produces 750 watts of illumination, whereas your standard lamp is around 60, 75, give or take, and LED lights are taking over. We haven't got there yet in this theater, but hopefully when we have the renovation, we'll get there with new equipment in that. So this is the standard equipment that is up in the catwalk behind you, and some are over the stage, and that provides illumination, able to control light in that. So, and what you see here is a line designer plans it all out. This is the plan that I created, placing the lights in the catwalk over the stage. A line designer has a plan, it's called a plot. And I, along with student help here, we get them hung, get them plugged in, get them working, get them focused on stage where we need them to go. And then once we get closer to the show, I start cueing the different, from scene to scene, different colors in that. But so there's paperwork involved, more technical paperwork than you might imagine in that. So, and it can, by the end, a lighting plot by the time opening will have a bunch of notes on it. As you can see, there's handwritten notes in there and that. And that was created with a computer-aided drafting program that I'm slowly getting into the 21st century. I'm sort of an old school designer that still likes to do things by hand. And I started last year working in this CAD program, so I'm slowly getting there with new technology and that. So a little bit on line design. How long does it take to put on a show? Well, on average, for a college or university, it's about 5 weeks. From the time the director casts the show, gets their actors, and you start rehearsals, and you start designing and executing and so forth and so on. So approximately 5 weeks. On Broadway, they have the luxury of funding and time, and sometimes they go months. Their process is months long, sometimes years, depending on that. But on average, in an academic setting, it's about 5 weeks from really beginning to closing night in that. I'm going to talk a little bit about the design process in that. So first you choose a play. You know, over a year ago we chose Into the Woods, and we chose it because it's a nice musical, good musical. It's Sondheim. Ken Wheeler and I both like Sondheim as opposed to maybe Rodgers and Hammerstein, if you know the difference in that. And then as a designer, I meet with the director who comes up with a concept. And the concept is what the director wants the play to say to the audience. And a concept can be as simple as, oh, will be dramatic, or I want it to be romantic. Or a concept can be very detailed, where a director might say, oh, I want a door here, I want stairs here, windows here, I want these colors, and so forth. And that another example of a concept can be a period, when the play takes place in, how you want to present the play. And for Into the Woods, the period was chosen 1750s, give or take, colonial America in that. So that's a spoiler. I just told you what things are going to look like in that. So based off of that conversation with the director, I went away to do research and on 1750s colonial America. I was already familiar with the period. I'm being also a history major, and I do like the colonial period. I actually miniature war game the colonial period, tabletop miniatures. So I was familiar with a lot of the periods. So it wasn't a heavy lift. I just had to go find some details for interiors and exteriors because I'm creating an environment in that. Okay, then I will do, after research, I do renderings. And I'll show you some examples later on here. Color renderings to show the director what the set will look like when it's done. And then after I show the renderings to the director, I get the approval. Oh, that's a great idea. Let's go with that. And so then I start doing the plans, more technical work, so that the environment, the hard scenery can get built. And then execution, not necessarily me, but actually creating the set and all that business. And, oh, this is going to work. One of the inspirations for this show, last term I was teaching theater history, and I came across this video of the Drottningham Theater in Sweden. It was discovered years ago in its original state from the 1760s. And what they did, they restored it to its functionality of 1760s. There's no hydraulics, electricity, or anything in it. And the way the scenery is painted three-dimensionally, but it's all flat scenery, and how it moved was my inspiration for this show. And if I can get this to short video, I didn't want to complicate things with soundtrack, but they restored it to it still functions for opera and it's all flat scenery that is on tracks or flown in and shows some actors. But the crew a lot of the crew you'll see is underneath the stage operating capstans and wooden bolted together scenery. They have slots in the floor and all this and that. And so if you go to Sweden, you can go see opera in this theater. So that was my inspiration. I came across, so I'm going, oh, I wish we could do that. So I did the best I could with our space because, for those of you who may not know, we have no basement underneath here to have scenery come up and this and that. So, in that. And the way I tried to, when you come to the show, you'll see I try to get the scenery to move on and off, much like they can do in that within our challenges here. So let's see if do I need to? Oh, we can stop that. Nope. Okay. Okay. I mentioned renderings. This is a rendering from 3 years ago of the play that we did in here, August Osage County. So this is what I would present to a director to say, based off the conversation we had in your concept, does this work? And that. And Ken Bush was director, and he said, yes, that'll work for me, because we had discussed, he needed a 3-story bedroom, living room, dining room, and thing. And this is how it was executed, and that, the actual set in 2015, and that. And that's sort of a bonus when I design, or any designer, is if we can get our artistic view of the concept into the play and have it actually executed and built in that. But with Into the Woods, what happened was I didn't do a finished rendering per se. Ken Wheeler, the director of Into the Woods, we've known each other for how long? 30-some years. We graduated the same year at Southern Utah University, and I did his senior project and so on and so forth. So we know each other. So I didn't necessarily have to do a complete rendering, but I did painter's elevations. These are examples of painter's elevations so that the scenery, once it's constructed, is built. And I showed those to Ken in lieu of a finished rendering. And that, so you have Rapunzel's tower, Cinderella's tree, the wings here, which you see here as well, the thrust out behind you around the orchestra pit and other scenic elements that when you see the play. So this is, in lieu of a rendering, this is what I supply to the director in that. And then also what a designer needs to do to supply to the director as well as to get it built and installed is a ground plan. And this one was done hand drafting. And you see the outline in scale, the Mackenzie Theater, the orchestra pit. Oh, I forgot to go. The orchestra pit, the thrust around. You're all sitting right there right now in that, and you see the wings, the hard wings, painted scenery, and then all the rolling units that are off stage currently in that. So, this is one of the first things after approval from the director that I create so that the director can rehearse before the scenery is built and know where things are coming and going in that. Then we start getting into the actual doing things after all the paperwork. We start with the empty theater. This is what Mackenzie looked like before we started building in that. And if I were to raise these soft goods, you'll see furniture storage back behind there and that. And then we start building the scenery. This was after week 1 where building the couple, 3, 4 rolling units here on stage, and that the units that the actors will actually be on, and some of them move on with, and that. And then by the end of week 2, we've got the surround around the orchestra pit. We've got other rolling units. We're starting back here on one unit painting and such, still some assembling down here and that. So we're progressing. Furniture's being found as well and used as is or being repainted as needed. Fortunately, a lot of the furniture that was chosen for the show were painted or are of the period, so we didn't have to do a bunch of repainting and finding of furniture. We had enough in our inventory in that. Then we got week 3, more units being finished, horse back there, the wings that here and so forth, things being cut out, painted, and so forth. And those are all students. All the people aside from Ken and I, are students. In academic setting, the labor force are the students, and all our production and our students are tied to our courses and so forth. And that, so without the students, none of us would be here. So there's that. So. This is one of the final dress rehearsal. This was Tuesday of this week. The orchestra is in here for the first time, getting ready to start final dress rehearsal, start with some of the scenic elements on stage at the top of the show and that. And so this was this week, 4th week, if you will. And then we get to actual performance and that with actors in costumes as well, with the lighting, with their props, with all the scenic elements in place and that. And you probably some of you may have noticed, at the top of the show, this presentation, I said on average this takes 5 weeks. Well, we sort of did it in 4, just for a variety of different reasons. So it was a little bit crazy this time around, but we survived. Everyone survived, so it got a little compressed in that. Well, other tidbits in the end. Construction, putting it together. One of the main tools, I brought on some more props here. So one of the main tools is that we assemble scenery is a screw gun. Now they're cordless. I started back when we had corded drills, and you always had to drag the cords on and to where you're working and so forth, and that, and so the cordless drill is what a lot of this is screwed together with, and that. Painting. Once everything is constructed, we have to paint them using standard brushes. Also, we use specific brushes for theaters. These are called scenic fitches, and they're essentially big artist brushes, and that that are much more dynamic in their use and hold more paint, and can be used as the sensei, up and down, paint on, off, or in any other direction. And they have round handles that if I had a length of bamboo, I could stick it on the bamboo and paint standing up if I had to paint something on the floor in that, which as I'm getting older can be beneficial in that. Also, when it comes to painting, I believe, if at all possible, to expose our students to the actual stuff they would find out in the real world. So I use scenic paint as opposed to house paint. Scenic paint is formulated. It's water-based, latex acrylic, but it's formulated to paint over any kind of material we might use in theater, whether it's wood, plastic, steel, fabric, styrofoam, and that's. But the one consideration is more expensive than going to Walmart. But I try to make it go as far as possible when we roll it out and use it in that. And we use the ubiquitous rollers for large areas and so forth, and that. The last time I did this was 2009, so I'm just trying to remember, and that. Other tidbits, just to leave you with this. Does anyone know the difference between theater spelled with an ER or versus RE? I know Luke does because I told it to him in a meeting weeks ago. Yes.
One version, and the other is that one is the space and one is the activity or the.
Yes. ER is the architecture, the space that you produce the theater in, or whether it's a movie theater in that. RE is the art of theater. Years ago in grad school, the head of the acting program told his actors, RE is the European version and ER is the American, and we're Americans, and that's the way it's going to be. But now that's the accepted definition is architecture versus the art of theater. The other tidbit I want to leave you with is that theater is not art until it's performed in front of a live audience. It's just the long creation, 5 weeks give or take, in that we're creating the art. Much like a sculptor chipping away at the marble, and that it's not art until it's done in a gallery, and that. Also, I like to equate the arts with athletics, because I teach a lot of students from athletics, a lot of the teams and I try to make them understand better. We have a cast of actors, they have a team, we have a director, they have a coach, they have a playbook, we have a script, and even with a script, even though it's maybe more precise, things can go awry, and that. They practice, rehearse. It's not a game until the audience comes in and sees it. It's not the art of theater, until an audience comes into the house and experiences it in that. So with that, I think I'm going to leave. The only other essential thing in theater, as it works with other disciplines, is that coffee should be in abundance to get through 5 weeks of production. So with that, I'll open up to questions, because I don't mind questions.
Let me know if you have a question. I'll bring you the microphone so it gets picked up.
What's the most
I don't know.
Oh,
It's for the live stream.
got it. What is the most challenging set you've ever built, either at EOU or elsewhere?
The most challenging sets I had to make was in 1997, give or take, was at the Granbury Opera House in Granbury, Texas, 20 minutes outside of Fort Worth. It was a converted saloon from the 1880s, and it had no wing space, no backstage, no fly system able to fly things in and out, and they wanted to do major musicals like My Fair Lady and Seven Brides for Seven Brothers and Annie, that if you're familiar with musicals, they have a lot of scenes going from here, there, and everywhere. So just trying to fit all the scenery and the coming and goings of scenery and backdrops, I had to paint and rig what are called roll drops, where the drops are like Venetian blinds, where they unroll and roll up as opposed to fly all the way in, and that. So that was challenging. I'm just going, this is crazy. But anyway, so that was probably the most challenging. The only other challenge was when I worked for the art department at Disneyland. All the scenic, and the art department at Disneyland designed and executed everything that was not permanent in the park. So all the parades, all the special events, all the movie promotions and that. And when you had to install something in the park, you had to do it after the park closed. So you had to be there like after midnight till 6 in the morning in the dark, installing things. They brought in lights, yes, but it just was crazy. We're in the middle of the night, Disneyland. No one else is around except employees working away and all this and that. So.
I'm here thinking about the Phantom of the Opera and when you dropped the chandelier onto the stage. And it occurs to me that you use a lot of math as a constructor of theater design.
Yep.
So could you talk a little bit about the importance of math in the arts?
At least for me, math, it's mostly related to geometry, fitting things in a certain space here and having enough space for the actors and that. Because we've got to make sure the actors can move about the environment and do it safely and so forth. And just creating the scenery, measuring it out in scale and executing it and that. So math is important. With the chandelier for the Phantom that we did in 2010, 10, 11, somewhere in there, I had to work out, the distance and the angle and getting it to land on the front of the stage and all this and that, which actually is a challenge for me because I'm not the greatest math person. And so so I'm always checking, okay, so this piece of, if I use this type of lumber, it's this size and for this construction and everything. And sometimes I forget that 2x4 is not 2 inches by 4 inches, and then I go, oh. And that, so it's like, and that, so it is important. I mean, theater as an art form combines everything, a lot of different things, and it represents life. And that, so it does use math, it does use chemistry, because with special effects you'll have flash pots that are chemicals, or in makeup you've got to make sure that the chemical composition of that makeup is good for the student, that they don't break out, allergic reaction, and that, and history and everything. I mean, and when we do musicals, we've also included the music end of things and that. So. Yeah, a lot of different things go into the art of theater.
So I'm thinking back to the fabulous opening things in the Olympics and how the stage turns into water, and it's all projection, I think. Do we have anything like that here?
No, those projectors, the entry-level versions of those are like at least $20,000+ of dollars. And that, yeah, it's like, they are, I mean, if you've ever seen a Cirque du Soleil show, it's a lot of projection to go with that. And it's one of those items that is, if we can stretch our funding, for the renovation of the theaters here starting 2019, it's a possibility that we might get a better projector than what AV and theater has at the moment. Basically, we can project, stuff, but we don't have the Gloriosky technology yet in that.
But you use some projection?
Yes, we do. I mean, in Spamalot, I projected on the side walls. In what was the last show that we did other projection? It all depends on the show, and now I can't remember which was the last show we really did projections aside from Spamalot. What? Oh, On the Verge. Yeah, we had some projections in that show in the Schwartz Theater. Interestingly enough, projection, though electronic lighting technology, is actually the purview of the scenic designer that creates the three-dimensional environment, because it becomes scenery, part of the three-dimensional. It's not a line design area person thing. So.
I was wondering why you decided why you chose the colonial era for this play, and then a second question is if you could talk a little bit about how maybe you and Heather work together in terms of costumes and stage stuff. So.
Well, the concept came from the director. Why'd you choose it? Why'd you choose the concept of colonial America, 1750s, give or take?
I'm a backseat person, and so I thought I'd just sit out there. The reason that I chose it, when we chose our season last year, our entire season, we went with the theme of Voices Across America. And if you look at all of the shows we did, they all had American playwrights, and they were set in either the Southwest or the Northeast or the Pacific Northwest. And Stephen Sondheim, who wrote the musical Into the Woods, is American from the Northeast. And yet I wanted to do something that was a little more Americana. And so I was thinking about the idea of Into the Woods being fairy tales. And I thought, do we have similar types of fairy tales in America? And while we don't have fairy tales, we do have like folk tales. Johnny Appleseed, we have those kinds of things, Rip Van Winkle. And so I thought that would be really fun if we were to set it in, well, Into the Woods itself is set in a fairy tale land, but it's nothing specific. So I thought, what if we set it in colonial America? It would help the idea of the Americana theme, and it would also be fun to just investigate that. And so that's what we did. That's where we came up with the idea for doing it that way.
Yeah. And then, I mean, and that's the period is mostly in the costumes, with the British and American colonials in that. Woods, sort of generic, but I did research colonial American, Georgian architecture in that for the scenic units in that, and interiors, exteriors as well, and that. And I always keep in mind when I'm designing the three-dimensional environment that that what I do does not create a problem where the costumes will disappear in front of it, and that, and Heather and I usually talk if there's a challenge in that, but I was very familiar with the period, so I designed basically, I designed what I did. And it all worked together in that, But as a team, small program, we talk a lot in that and coordinate in that, because part of my job, all the designers' job is we're to tell part of the story. We're to help the storytellers, the actors, tell the story, and that it's not my job to design. I try to design good scenery and all that, but not to design scenery that distracts from their storytelling and that, but helps them tell the story, and we all coordinate so that it all works together in that. So,
just to add kind of an interesting tidbit that you probably wouldn't realize if you didn't know this, when you come to see the show, there'll be a couple of things that you'll see that will lend the idea of the concept, and that's the idea. When I started thinking about it, I thought, okay, we have a wolf. who comes and attacks Little Red Riding Hood. How can we find something from that period that would be similar? And one day I was watching a television commercial, and it had an old French trapper. And he had all fur, and he had a huge wolf head on his hat. And I thought, there's my wolf. So our wolf is a French trapper. And then the princes, I thought, okay, we didn't have princes in America. But at that time, princes would sometimes, princes would do their military service, just like Harry and Prince William did. And so I thought, okay, our princes are doing their military service in America. And so you'll see that one of our princes is dressed in a British soldier costume for half of the act, for one of the acts. So we tried to give indications, and I want to give Mike a lot more credit because you see it in the scenery. You can see as you look at it, the poor characters in a log cabin. You know, when we go into the richer characters' homes, you see them, and it's very indicative of it. And I thought he brilliantly was able to capture the period. It's not something that's terribly obvious. In the program, it only says one little indication about time, 1750, place, colonial America. But hopefully you'll get that sense as you watch the show.
So the other, oh, yes, Luke. Luke's got a question. Ooh, yeah.
More terminology, Mike.
Yeah.
Yesterday during the renovation meeting, they were talking about the fly. Is all this apparatus up here called the fly, or is one particular one the fly?
The fly is, well, above us is 45 feet to what's called the grid, which supports the fly system. That is all the pipes that everything's hung on, whether it's an electric with stage lighting or scenery or curtains. And the fly system is operated usually off stage right or left. Ours is over stage right, to where a crew person has to unlock a lock and pull on a rope to get it to fly in and out. And that, so they do make computerized, motorized fly systems now that you can program and press a button and that's another one of those things that if we can stretch our budget with the renovation, we might afford some and that. So the flies are everything that flies up and down, that whole system. So
And that we were talking about making some mechanical,
Yeah.
and there might be priorities for ones that are activated more than others.
Right. Well, what they did in the original 28 years ago with this, they left 13 open slots in our fly system. So they could add 13 motorized slots in between the manual slots. So that's what they're talking about. Because I met with the vendor after your meeting, because I was in here working away. So, yeah.
The proscenium, is that?
Proscenium, that's the opening, the rectangular opening that the audience sees the play through in that. It's also called, this is a proscenium theater, and that is one of the first theaters developed coming out of the Renaissance that we know of. Audience there, stage here, and the proscenium opening is the piece of architecture that divides the two. Though our stage extends out a little further than a proscenium. The early proscenium theaters, the stage might have ended right at the opening. So.
And how would you use a hydraulic pit? Or
Well,
describe what?
hydraulic lifts, orchestra pits have been motorized for years. The college that Ken and I went to had a big orchestra pit that was much bigger than this one, that went down, had storage underneath the stage, and that's how they loaded the grand piano and all this and that. And it would just mean that if we had a motorized elevator type lift out there, that for some events we could have it up so that the event was closer to the audience, or we could lower it down to the carpeted level out there so that you could have things there and maybe still closer to the audience, or it could go all the way down to open the orchestra pit so that the orchestra can get in there and do their thing. Our big wish list for the orchestra pit for the renovation is to expand the pit, because it gets pretty crowded when you have more than, and Sarah knows, and Steve know, they're playing in there. It can get pretty crowded when you have a big orchestra in there. We'd like to expand it, put a elevated lift in it, and if possible put storage underneath the stage for the new grand piano that's being fundraised for, so that it's safer and more secure and not sitting off stage left where it usually hangs out, and that and make the front of the stage more user friendly, if you will, and all this and that. It's yeah, so
I'll have you know I knew what stage left and stage right was.
okay. It's the stage directions are always from the performer's point of view. So
Other questions?
shh, quiet. We're getting close. At 5 o'clock, some of the actors are called for the show tonight. And if there's no more questions, I encourage you, if you have not seen the show yet, tickets are picking up. We had close to 200 people attend last night for opening, which is a good crowd for a Wednesday opening. And I get ticket sales emailed to my computer, so I see how sales are going, and it just keeps exponentially going up. And so by Saturday, if you haven't gotten a ticket, there may not be tickets. So tell your friends, family, and all that. So
All right. Thank you so much. Very informative
You're welcome.
presentation. Join me.
thank you.